She had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, and on the morning of her 30th birthday, she stood alone in a bakery and canceled her own cake. Not because she forgot, not because no one cared, because the woman who had everything had quietly decided that her employees' paychecks mattered more than her own celebration. And she was prepared to walk out of that bakery without letting a single person see her cry. But one man saw everything, and what he did next would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. And when you're done watching, drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's get into it. The bakery on Clement Street smelled the way good bakeries always smell. Warm sugar, vanilla, something faintly floral underneath it all. On a Tuesday morning in late October, the place wasn't crowded. A few people sat with their coffees near the window. A mother wrestled a stroller through the door. Behind the glass display case, 3 employees moved quietly around each other, restocking trays of croissants and adjusting little handwritten price tags. Sophia Ashcroft wheeled herself through the front entrance at 9:14 in the morning and parked near the counter without making a sound. She had been coming to this bakery for 4 years. Back before the accident, she used to walk in, stand at the counter, and spend way too long debating between the almond croissant and the chocolate hazelnut tart before ordering both. Now she came in a wheelchair, a sleek, custom-built model in matte black that her physical therapist had helped her select 8 months after the surgery. And she always chose a spot near the end of the counter where the space was widest, where she didn't have to ask anyone to move a chair. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Ms. Ashcroft. The woman behind the counter, a round-faced woman in her 50s named Wren, looked up with a wide smile that faded just slightly when she read Sophia's expression. "We have everything ready. You want me to bring it out?" "Actually," Sophia said, and then stopped. She looked down at her hands in her lap. Her fingers were folded together, knuckles pale. She was wearing a dark blazer over a cream blouse, dressed for a board meeting she was supposed to attend by noon. And her hair was pulled back tightly, the way she wore it when she wanted to look like she was in control of something. "Actually," she said again, "I need to cancel it." Wren blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The order. The birthday cake." Sophia's voice was even. She had practiced even. "I need to cancel it. I understand there's a balance remaining. I'm happy to pay it, obviously. The prep work is done. I just don't need it anymore." Wren looked at her for a long moment, then looked down at the order slip on the counter. The cake had been custom. A 3-tier pink buttercream with hand-piped peonies and a specific inscription across the top. Sophia had ordered it 6 weeks ago, during what the company's communications team had been describing publicly as a period of strategic recalibration. What it actually was, in plain terms, was a financial collapse. Not total, not irreversible, but close enough that the word layoffs had been used in a closed-door meeting, and Sophia had not slept more than 4 hours a night since. "Ms. Ashcroft," Wren said carefully, "you've already paid for most of it." "I know. Whatever's left, just tell me the amount." "It's your birthday." Sophia looked up. Something moved across her face. Not quite a flinch, but close. "I know what day it is," she said. "Can you just tell me the balance?" Wren told her. Sophia paid it without hesitation, slid her card back into her wallet, and said thank you in the polite, clipped way she said most things when she was using all of her energy to hold herself together. Then she turned her wheelchair toward the exit. Lucas Hayes had been sitting at the corner table for about 20 minutes, working on the second half of a breakfast sandwich he hadn't been particularly hungry for. He was between jobs, not unemployed exactly, but the construction contract he'd been counting on had been pushed back 2 weeks, which meant 2 weeks of school pickup duties, 2 weeks of helping his daughter with her homework at the kitchen table, and too many mornings like this one where he came to a bakery and drank coffee slowly because the apartment felt too quiet with Mia at school. He was 32 years old, and he had the kind of face that people described as kind before they remembered the word handsome, a scar along his jawline from an old injury, hands that were broad and rough and had fixed more things than he could count. He wore a gray t-shirt and dark jeans and work boots that had seen better days, and he had been paying absolutely zero attention to anyone else in the bakery until the woman in the wheelchair said the words, "Cancel it." He didn't stare. He wasn't the type to stare. But he watched. The way you watch something that doesn't quite make sense, trying to figure out what you're seeing. The woman paid, thanked the bakery employee, turned toward the door. And as she passed through a slant of morning light coming through the front window, Lucas saw her face clearly for about 2 seconds. She wasn't crying. She had clearly decided she wasn't going to cry, and she was succeeding in the way people succeed at things through sheer force of will, with everything costing them something. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were dry. She was 30 years old on her birthday. She had just paid a bakery to not give her a cake, and she was going to wheel herself out of this building with her spine straight and her chin level, and not one person in this room was going to know that anything was wrong. Lucas knew that look. He had worn it himself 6 years ago, standing in a hospital corridor while a doctor told him things he hadn't been ready to hear. He had worn it at the funeral. He had worn it for most of the year after that, driving Mia to and from kindergarten, packing lunches, answering questions a 4-year-old shouldn't have had to ask about where her mother went. He recognized it because it wasn't a dramatic look. It wasn't the face of someone about to fall apart. It was the face of someone who had already done all their falling apart in private and was now managing the public version of themselves with everything they had. He stood up before he made a conscious decision to stand up. "Hey," he said it to Ren quietly, as Sophia pushed through the door and disappeared onto the sidewalk. "Can I ask you something?" "Oh." Ren wasn't supposed to share customer information. She said that first, which Lucas respected, so he rephrased. "Is she okay?" he said. Ren looked at him for a moment, then looked toward the door, then back. "She's a regular," she said carefully. "She's been going through some things." "The cake she canceled, it was for her birthday?" Ren nodded slowly. Lucas looked at the door for a beat. Then he said, "What's left to do on it?" Ren blinked. "It's already made." "Then what was the balance she just paid?" Ren told him. It wasn't a small number. The cake had been custom, hours of work, but it wasn't a number that would break him either. He pulled out his wallet. "I want to pay for it," Lucas said. "Whatever she paid you just now. I'll cover it, and she can have the cake." Ren stared at him. "Sir, I'm not trying to be weird about it," Lucas said. He put money on the counter. "Don't tell her it was me. Tell her it's, I don't know, a community thing, a donation program, whatever makes sense. Just make sure she doesn't leave without it." Ren looked at the money on the counter. She looked at Lucas. She had been working at this bakery for 11 years, and she had seen a lot of people come through the door, and she was a reasonably good judge of character. "She's going to be outside for a little while," Ren said. "She usually parks a few spaces down." "Okay," Lucas said. "You want me to tell her the Community Appreciation Program covers 1 birthday order per person?" "Sure," Lucas said. "That sounds like a real thing." Ren picked up the money. "You want a receipt?" "No," Lucas said. "I really don't." He went back to his table and finished his coffee. He didn't go to the window. He didn't check whether Sophia had come back inside. He just sat with his cup and the last third of his breakfast sandwich and thought about his wife, Claire, the way he sometimes did when he witnessed something that reminded him that pain didn't make announcements. Claire had been like that, good at looking fine. She'd broken her wrist once and driven herself to urgent care and called him afterward, almost offhand, like it was an errand she'd run. She said she hadn't wanted to worry him. He'd been furious and then immediately not furious because he understood her. He had always understood her. He missed her in waves. That was the only way he'd ever been able to describe it. Not a constant ache, though there were stretches of that too, but waves. Something triggered it, and you were under the water for a few minutes, and then you came up again. He came up now, finished his coffee, left a tip, and went outside. Through the bakery window, he caught a glimpse of Ren near the front with the pink box in her hands, gesturing toward the door. He walked to his truck, got in, and did not look back. What Lucas didn't see. Sophia had been sitting in the parking lot for 11 minutes, trying to decide whether it was appropriate to cry in public before 10 in the morning. She had decided no. Reflexively, automatically, the way she decided most things related to her own emotional displays. But her hands were not cooperating with that decision. They were still in her lap, still folded together, and the knuckles had gone from pale to white. She was thinking about the meeting she had in 2.5 hours, during which she would sit across from her CFO and her legal team and the 2 investors who had not yet pulled out, and she would talk about restructuring and strategy and revised projections. And she would do it with the same level voice she used for everything, because she had long ago understood that a woman in her position was not allowed to have a visible bad day. A male CEO could get photographed losing his temper at a press conference, and it became a story about passion. Sophia had once teared up during a product launch after a standing ovation from her team, and a tech journalist had published a piece questioning whether she was emotionally stable enough to lead. That had been 3 years ago, before the accident. She still thought about it sometimes. The accident itself was not something she talked about in professional contexts, which meant she had effectively divided her life into two halves. The version she presented to boardrooms and investors and the press, and the version that existed in her apartment at night, in physical therapy 3 times a week, in the bathroom when she sometimes looked at the scar along her left hip and felt a grief that had no clean name. She had been good at keeping those two halves separate. She was not being very good at it this morning. Her phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. She knew without looking that it was something work-related, a reminder, a message, a problem that needed solving. There were always problems that needed solving. That had been true before the accident, and it was more true now because the accident had not just taken her mobility, but had also taken 6 months of her ability to lead the company at full capacity. And in those 6 months, things had gone wrong in ways that were still being untangled. She didn't check the phone. She sat in the parking lot on her 30th birthday and stared at the windshield of the car that had been modified so she could drive it, and she thought, "I am so tired." That was when she heard the bakery door open behind her. "Ms. Ashcroft?" She turned. Wren was standing in the doorway in her apron, holding a pink pastry box. "I'm sorry to bother you," Wren said, "but we have your order." Sophia frowned. "I canceled that order." "Yes, ma'am, but it turns out you qualify for our Community Appreciation Program. It's something we've been doing for a while now, for regular customers who've had a hard year." Wren was not a natural liar, and it showed, but she held her ground. "The balance has been covered. The cake is yours." Sophia looked at her. Then she looked at the pink box. Then she looked back at Wren. "Who covered it?" "The program," Wren said. "That's kind of the whole point of it. Anonymous." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "That's not a real program," she said. Wren met her eyes. "The cake is real," she said gently. "Musset." What Wren would remember later, when she thought about that morning, was not the moment Sophia took the box. It was the moment just before, the 3 or 4 seconds in which Sophia sat perfectly still in her wheelchair in the parking lot, holding the pink box in her lap, and something in her face shifted. Not dramatically, not the way things shift in movies, more like something small and internal releasing the tiniest amount of pressure it had been under for a very long time. She didn't cry in front of Wren. She waited until Wren went back inside. Then she sat alone in the parking lot with the pink birthday cake in her lap, and she cried with her hand pressed over her mouth in that particular way. People cry when they're trying to be quiet about it, chest shaking, shoulders pulled forward, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep you almost don't recognize what triggered it. It wasn't the cake. It was the being seen, not by someone who wanted something from her, not by someone angling for a meeting or a mention or a favor, by someone who had simply looked at her real situation, not the curated public version, and had quietly decided she deserved something kind. She had not felt that in a very long time. After a while, she pressed the back of her hand against her eyes and breathed. She checked her reflection in her phone camera, made the small repairs she needed to make, and sat up straight. The meeting was in 2 hours and 15 minutes. She had a company to save. She picked up her phone and answered the message she'd been ignoring, and she typed back with her usual precision and authority. And when she drove out of that parking lot, she looked exactly like herself again, composed, capable, the woman who had built something from nothing and was not finished building yet. But the cake sat on the passenger seat beside her, and she did not leave it behind. In his truck 3 blocks away, Lucas Hayes was thinking about his daughter. Mia was 8, and she had her mother's eyes, and she had her father's stubbornness, and she had a laugh that could fill a room in a way that still sometimes caught Lucas off guard. This bright, unself-conscious sound that belonged to someone who hadn't learned yet that the world sometimes tried to dim you down. He wanted to keep her that way as long as possible. He was going to pick her up at 3 o'clock. They were going to make spaghetti for dinner because it was her choice this week, and she always chose spaghetti. He was going to help her with a project about weather systems that was due on Friday and that he understood roughly 50% of, which meant they'd be looking things up together on his phone at the kitchen table, which Mia found hilarious, and he pretended to find embarrassing. He thought about the woman in the bakery. He thought about the expression on her face as she'd turned toward the door. He'd done a small thing. It wasn't a big thing. He didn't want it to be a big thing. He'd spent enough years watching people perform generosity for an audience that he had a deep instinctive aversion to generosity that announced itself. He hoped she'd taken the cake. He turned onto the highway ramp and drove north and did not expect to see her again. The board meeting ran 40 minutes over schedule, which meant Sophia didn't get back to her office until nearly 2 in the afternoon, and by then the cake had been sitting in the small refrigerator behind her assistant's desk for 3 hours. Her assistant, a 26-year-old named Derek, who had been with the company for 18 months and had the particular talent of knowing when not to ask questions, had carried it up from her car without comment when she arrived. He'd simply appeared beside her in the parking garage, taken the pink box from her lap with a neutral expression, and said, "I'll put this somewhere cold." "Thank you," she'd said. Neither of them mentioned it again. The board meeting had gone the way board meetings went when a company was wounded but not dead, carefully, tensely, with a lot of language designed to sound optimistic, while actually meaning we're watching you very closely. The two remaining investors had asked questions Sophia had answered with full command of the numbers and zero command of her actual feelings about any of it. Her CFO, a precise man named Warren, who communicated primarily through spreadsheets and carefully timed size, had walked everyone through the restructuring timeline. Legal had outlined the terms of the revised agreements. Sophia had sat at the head of the table and run the meeting the way she always ran meetings, without hesitation, without visible uncertainty, with the particular quality of attention that made people feel like she'd been thinking about nothing else for weeks, which, to be fair, was accurate. What no one in that room knew was that she had cried in a parking lot 2 hours earlier. What no one in that room had known for a long time was that she cried at all. She had built that separation carefully, deliberately, over years, and with more effort after the accident, because the accident had made her visibility unavoidable in ways she hadn't anticipated. You could not be in a wheelchair in a boardroom full of standing people and go unnoticed. You could not avoid the particular quality of attention that people gave you when they were trying to figure out whether to treat you the same as before or differently, and trying not to let you see them figuring it out. She had responded to that by being impeccably, almost aggressively competent in every visible context. It worked, mostly. It cost her something she couldn't fully quantify, but it worked. After the meeting, she sent Derek home early, which she sometimes did when she needed the outer office empty, and she sat at her desk for a long while without turning on her computer. The city was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, gray October sky, traffic moving 30 floors below, a construction crane turning slowly in the middle distance. At some point, she got up and retrieved the cake from the refrigerator. She set it on her desk and opened the box. It was exactly as she'd ordered it 6 weeks ago. 3 tiers, soft pink buttercream, hand-piped peonies along the base, and top edge in cream and blush, and a deep rose that was almost red. In the center of the top tier, in slightly uneven script that the decorator had told her was intentional because perfect script looked corporate and handmade script looked human, Sophia. 30. Finally. She had written that inscription herself. She didn't remember now what she'd been thinking when she wrote it. Something wry, she supposed. Something acknowledging that 30 felt like an arrival, the beginning of something more solid. That had been 6 weeks ago, before the quarterly numbers came in, before the emergency calls with the investors, before she'd spent 2 weeks looking at her own company's financials the way you look at a wound to see how deep it goes. She sat with the cake in front of her for a while, in her office on the 30th floor, alone. Then she got a fork from the small kitchen down the hall, and she ate a piece standing at her own desk. Sitting at her desk, technically, with the city gray and distant outside and no one around to see her do it. It was very good cake. She had not eaten since 6 in the morning, and the sugar hit her immediately, and for about 4 minutes she thought about nothing except the fact that she was 30 years old, and she had built a company that was still standing even after everything, and she was eating birthday cake by herself in her office, and all of that was simultaneously a little sad, and also somehow okay. She closed the box. She wiped the fork. She turned on her computer and worked until 8 o'clock. That night, before she went to sleep, she thought briefly about the stranger who had paid for it. She imagined some vague and benevolent figure, older, probably, someone who did that kind of thing regularly, who believed in small gestures and community and all of that, someone with a large and uncomplicated heart. She pictured someone nothing like herself. She fell asleep still thinking about it, and the thought she fell asleep on was simply, I hope they know it mattered. Lucas didn't think about Sophia Ashcroft again for 2 weeks. Not because he was callous, it just wasn't the kind of thing he held on to. He'd done something small. It was done. That was the whole point of doing it the way he'd done it, anonymously, without any expectation of a follow-up or a thank you or a story to tell. He had learned a long time ago, partly from watching other people and partly from going through things himself, that the gestures you made quietly were the ones that didn't rot. The ones you talked about, the ones you held up for other people to admire. Those had a way of curdling. His father had been a big talker about his own generosity, and Lucas had grown up watching the gap between what his father said and what he actually did, and had quietly decided he didn't want to be that kind of man, so he went back to his life. The construction contract started up again, which meant early mornings and physical work and the particular kind of exhaustion that was actually pleasant because it was earned. Mia had a school concert that he attended in a folding chair in a gymnasium that smelled like industrial cleaner, and she played the recorder badly and with enormous enthusiasm, and he clapped louder than anyone else in the room. They drove home with the windows down, even though it was cold, because Mia said she needed the wind, and he didn't argue. He cooked dinner most nights. He paid his bills. He called his sister in Portland on Sunday afternoons and let Mia do most of the talking because Mia had more interesting things to report. He slept 6 hours a night on average, which he knew wasn't enough, but which he hadn't managed to fix in about 3 years. He was, by most visible measures, fine. I was also, in the way of people who have been through significant loss and have come out the other side of it still functional but permanently altered, a little quieter than he used to be. Not sad exactly, just someone who understood what mattered and what didn't in a way that had required something from him to learn, and he didn't always know how to be around people who hadn't learned it yet. Mia helped with that. Mia was 8, and she cared intensely about things like which color was the best color, and whether hot chocolate should have mini marshmallows or regular ones, and whether the cat that sometimes appeared on their fire escape was the same cat or a different cat that looked the same. And being around that intensity of caring about small things had a way of loosening something in Lucas that tended to tighten up when he was alone too long. He was fine. He told himself that with some regularity, and it was mostly true. The letter arrived on a Thursday, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer, and Lucas almost missed it because the envelope looked like junk mail. Standard white, no return address he recognized, the name printed rather than handwritten. But it had Mia's full name on it, Mia Claire Hayes. He set the other mail down. He almost opened it himself, then didn't. She'd been on a thing lately about her mail being her mail, a point of personal sovereignty she defended with great seriousness. So he set it on the kitchen table and waited until he picked her up from school. She tore it open in the car before he'd pulled out of the pickup line. "Dad?" Her voice changed. "Dad, it's from a foundation." "What kind of foundation?" "The Ashcroft Foundation." She was reading, lips moving slightly the way she did when she was processing something quickly. "It says, Dad, it says I got a scholarship." He put the car in park, even though they were still technically in the school pickup line, and the car behind him was going to have opinions about that. "Read it to me," he said. Mia read it to him, in her clear, slightly breathless reading voice, the way she read things that were important. The Ashcroft Foundation's annual merit-based scholarship for children from single-parent households. Academic achievement, community involvement, demonstrated resilience. Those were the words the letter used. Lucas thought about the recommendation letter her third-grade teacher had written, and the essay Mia had written about her mother that Lucas had only read once and had not reread since because once had been enough. The scholarship covered the arts program Mia had wanted to do for 2 years, the weekend classes at the Community Arts Center that were more than Lucas could comfortably fit into the budget without moving something else. "Dad," Mia said. She was looking at him over the letter. "Are you crying?" "No," Lucas said. "Your eyes are... I have something in my eye." "Both of them?" "It's a bilateral situation," he said. "Read me the rest of the letter." She read him the rest of the letter, which included the date of an award ceremony the following month, at the Ashcroft Foundation's community center on the north side of the city. Attendance was requested, the letter said, which Mia found very formal, for the scholarship recipients and their families. Lucas drove home with his daughter beside him, reading the letter again to herself, and he did not think about the woman in the bakery. The name Ashcroft didn't land anywhere particular in his mind. He was thinking about Mia and the arts program, and the essay she had written about her mother, and whether there was a version of life in which things eventually lined up in ways you didn't expect. He was thinking, something good happened. He let himself have that for the rest of the drive home. The night before the ceremony, Lucas ironed a shirt. He owned 2 button-down shirts that were appropriate for non-construction contexts, and he chose the darker one because Mia had told him it made him look less like he was going to fix someone's deck, which he had decided to take as a compliment. Mia wore a blue dress with small white flowers on it that she'd picked out herself at a second-hand shop 2 weekends ago, and she stood in front of the bathroom mirror with immense seriousness, doing something to her hair with a brush that Lucas understood was important but couldn't have explained. She had her mother's way of approaching her own reflection. Not vain, just attentive, like she and the mirror had business to discuss. "You look great," Lucas said from the doorway. "I know," Mia said, which was not arrogance, just 8-year-old matter-of-factness. And Lucas loved her so much it was sometimes physically difficult to be in the same room with it. They drove to the community center in the late morning, found parking 3 blocks away because the lot was full, and walked in with a small crowd of other families. Kids in their nicest clothes, parents trying to look like they came to things like this regularly. The lobby had high ceilings and clean lines, and there were photographs on the walls of community projects, gardens, murals, tutoring programs, kids in workshops, adults in computer classes. A banner above the main entrance read, "Ashcroft Foundation, Building What Lasts." Lucas stood in the lobby reading the photographs while Mia signed in at the registration table and got a small badge with her name on it, which she immediately pressed onto the front of her dress with the gravity of someone receiving a medal. "Can we get cookies?" she asked, pointing at a long table near the far wall. "After," Lucas said. "After what?" "After whatever happens first." "That's not an answer." "Go look at the photographs," he said. She went and looked at the photographs, which kept her occupied for approximately 90 seconds before she came back and asked again about the cookies. He got her a cookie. She ate it in 3 bites and immediately looked better about everything, which he noted privately as a parenting strategy he already knew but sometimes forgot. The ceremony itself was held in a large open room with folding chairs arranged in rows and a small raised platform at the front. A woman from the foundation staff spoke first, brief, warm, competent, about the organization's programs and the selection process for the scholarships. Then she mentioned the foundation's chairwoman, who would be presenting the awards personally this year. Lucas was watching Mia, who was sitting very straight beside him in the way she sat when she was trying to make a good impression on people who hadn't met her yet, when he heard the sound of a wheelchair moving across the hardwood floor of the platform. He looked up. The woman who rolled onto the platform was in a tailored gray blazer over a white blouse, her dark hair pulled back, a small wireless microphone clipped near her collar. She moved to the center of the platform with efficient, practiced ease and stopped facing the audience, and she smiled. A real smile, not a performance smile, one that reached her eyes and made her look younger than she probably was. Lucas stopped breathing for approximately 2 seconds. He knew her. Not knew her. He didn't know her. He had sat 20 feet from her in a bakery for about 8 minutes, and he had watched her for 2 of those minutes, and he had thought about her a handful of times since. But he recognized her the way you recognize people you've watched in an unguarded moment. Something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself. Sophia Ashcroft. The name on the banner above the door, the name on Mia's letter, the name on the photographs in the lobby. It was her. The woman with the pink cake. Lucas sat very still and tried to work out whether this was something he should feel strange about. He decided he didn't know yet. On the platform, Sophia was speaking to the room. Her voice was clear and unhurried, and she had the gift, not everyone had it, of sounding like she was talking to each person individually rather than at a crowd. "I started this foundation," she was saying, "because I believe that the people who have the least visibility are often the ones doing the most quiet, sustained, important work. Raising kids alone, holding things together, making the best out of situations that didn't offer them a lot of options. And I wanted to create something that said, 'We see you,' not out of pity, out of respect." Mia, beside Lucas, was listening with her full face, eyebrows slightly raised, mouth slightly open, the expression she wore when something was going directly in. Lucas kept his eyes on the platform. He was good at listening to people without letting them see him listening, a habit that had come from years of being on job sites where you learned a lot by paying attention to what wasn't being said directly. He noticed that Sophia spoke about the foundation with genuine conviction, but referenced herself rarely and without emphasis. That she seemed genuinely pleased about the kids in the room and not in a way that was performing pleasedness. That when she made a small mistake in one sentence and corrected it, she didn't treat it as something to recover from. She just corrected it and kept going. He noticed that she did not look like she'd been crying lately, and he was glad. The scholarship presentations went alphabetically. Mia was fifth, Hayes, and when her name was called, she stood up and walked to the platform in her blue dress with the white flowers, and Sophia leaned forward slightly in her wheelchair to hand Mia the envelope and shake her hand, and she said something to Mia quietly that Lucas couldn't hear. Whatever it was made Mia grin, the specific grin she reserved for things she found genuinely funny. Lucas filed that away. After the ceremony, families clustered in small groups, and there were more cookies, and the foundation staff circulated with information about other programs. Lucas stood near the window with a cup of coffee that was slightly too hot to drink and watched Mia working the room the way she worked every room, moving from one cluster of kids to the next, with the particular social confidence of children who have grown up primarily around adults and have lost their fear of introducing themselves. He was watching her talk to another kid near the cookie table when he became aware that Sophia's wheelchair had stopped a few feet to his left. He turned. She was looking at him. Not with recognition, not yet. With the slightly puzzled expression of someone who is sure they've seen a face before and can't place it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't mean to stare, You look familiar." "You might have seen me around," Lucas said. "I'm pretty forgettable." "No," she said, with a directness that suggested she wasn't being polite. "That's not it." She studied him for another moment. "Did you go to Clement Preparatory?" "No." "Marchetti S? The hardware place on Dunmore?" "Not usually." She shook her head slightly, almost to herself. "I'll think of it later. That's always how it works." She extended her hand. "Sophia Ashcroft." "Lucas Hayes," he said. "Mia's my daughter." Something warmed in her expression. "She's wonderful. I told her she had a great handshake." "She's been practicing," Lucas said. "She read somewhere that handshakes matter, and she's been making everyone shake her hand for 2 months." "She told me," Sophia said. "She told me she made her teacher practice with her." Miss Bernal was very patient about it. Sophia laughed. A real one, short and unguarded, the kind that escapes before you decide to let it. Then she seemed briefly surprised at herself, which Lucas caught and chose not to remark on. "She wrote a very moving scholarship essay," Sophia said, more quietly. "I read all of them personally. Hers? I read it twice." Lucas looked across the room at his daughter, who was currently explaining something to another kid with the specific intensity she brought to explanations. "She wrote it herself. I told her I'd read it, and she said she didn't want me to." Sophia looked at him. "Did you respect that?" "I read it anyway," Lucas said. A beat of silence. Then Sophia said, "How was it?" "I had something in both eyes afterward," he said. "Bilateral situation." She looked at him for a moment, and something in her expression shifted. Not much, but enough. Like she'd just recalibrated something. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "is there coffee somewhere? I was supposed to have some earlier, and I got pulled into 3 conversations before I made it to the table." "Near the back wall," he said. "I can get you a cup." "I can get my own cup," she said, not unkindly. "But you could walk with me." They had coffee together for about 15 minutes, standing near the back of the room, or Lucas standing, Sophia beside him at a slightly different height, a geometry they both navigated without comment. They talked about Mia and about the arts program, and then about the foundation and how it had started, which Sophia explained in the plain, matter-of-fact way she seemed to explain most things, without embellishment. "My company had a rough year," she said. "I had a rough year personally, and I found myself thinking about all the ways that people don't see each other, don't actually look. And I had some resources, and I wanted to do something real with them, not the kind of giving that's mostly about optics." She turned her cup in her hands. "Sorry, that sounds like a speech." "It doesn't," Lucas said. She glanced at him. "You're very easy to talk to. Most people think I'm quiet." You were quiet, she said. That's different from hard to talk to. Lucas didn't answer that, but he thought about it. Across the room, Mia had found him again with her eyes. The tracking system she'd had since she was small, always knowing where he was without making it obvious, and gave him a small eyebrows-up look that Lucas interpreted as a question. He gave her the slight chin lift that meant, I'm fine, stay where you are. She stayed where she was. That's a whole language, Sophia said, watching the exchange. We've had 8 years to develop it. Does she know what all your signals mean too? More than I know, Lucas said. She reads me better than I read myself most of the time. Sophia was quiet for a moment. That must be something, she said. Not enviously, not with sadness exactly. With the tone of someone acknowledging something real. She's the best person I know, Lucas said. That sounds like something you're supposed to say about your kid. But I mean it as a factual statement. Sophia looked at Mia across the room. I believe you, she said. They finished their coffee. A Foundation staff member came to pull Sophia into a conversation about a venue issue for an upcoming event, and she excused herself with a glance at Lucas that was, he thought, an actual look of mild regret at the interruption. Not performed, just real. He went and found Mia, who grabbed his arm and said, Did you just have a whole conversation with the lady from the stage? We had coffee, he said. Dad, Mia said with enormous 8-year-old gravity. She's the chairwoman. I know who she is. Did you tell her you work construction? We didn't cover everything. Mia looked across the room to where Sophia was now in conversation with the staff member, hands moving as she talked. Then she looked back at her father with an expression he recognized as the beginning of a theory she was constructing. Stop, he said. I didn't say anything. You were about to. You don't know what I was going to say. Mia. She pressed her lips together. She seemed nice, she said, in the careful, neutral tone of someone being very deliberate about staying in their lane. That's all. They walked to the car together, Mia's scholarship envelope under her arm, and the afternoon was cool and pale and smelled like cut grass from somewhere nearby, and Lucas held the passenger door open for his daughter and thought, for no particular reason he could name, about the woman in the bakery holding her pink cake and not letting herself cry until she was alone. I thought about what Sophia had said, the ways that people don't see each other, don't actually look. He got in the car. He didn't think about the fact that he hadn't told her where he recognized her from, or that she still hadn't placed him, or that the thing connecting them was still sitting somewhere unnamed between them like an unopened envelope. He just drove home with his daughter. It was a good afternoon. He let it be a good afternoon without making it into anything else. That was something he'd gotten reasonably good at, letting good things land without immediately worrying about what they meant or what came next. The afternoon light came through the windshield, and Mia talked about the ceremony and about the other kids she'd met, and about whether the arts program met on weekdays or weekends. And Lucas answered her questions and watched the road and felt, quietly, like something had shifted slightly, some small internal weight redistributed. He couldn't have said toward what. He just drove, and the city moved past the windows, and his daughter sat beside him in her blue dress with her scholarship envelope and her great handshake, and neither of them knew yet how much that morning had already changed. Lucas didn't go back to the Foundation the following week. He thought about it once, on a Wednesday evening while Mia was at her first arts program session, and he was sitting in his truck in the parking lot of the community center, reading the same 3 paragraphs of a paperback he'd been trying to finish for 2 months. He thought about it the way you think about something you're not ready to examine directly, sideways, briefly, then away. He didn't go back. What he did instead was drop Mia off on Saturday mornings and pick her up 2 hours later, and in between he ran errands or sat in the truck or walked the neighborhood, and each time he pulled into the parking lot at pickup, he did not look at the Foundation's main building, the way someone looks at a place they're hoping to catch a glimpse of something. He was fairly certain he was not doing that. Mia, for her part, talked about the arts program constantly, the projects, the other kids, the instructor, a woman named Phoebe, who apparently had purple hair and strong opinions about color theory. And in passing, every few weeks, she mentioned things she'd observed about the Foundation itself. The garden in the courtyard that volunteers maintained, the Wednesday afternoon tutoring sessions that ran until 6, the community board in the lobby where people posted things they needed or could offer. You should volunteer, Mia said one Sunday morning over cereal, in the carefully casual tone she used when she'd been thinking about something for a while and was finally deploying it. Lucas looked at her over his coffee. Should I? They need people for the community garden project. It's on the board. She stirred her cereal. Also the Saturday build-out. They're redoing the back storage room into a workshop space, and they need people who know construction stuff. You've been reading the board. I read everything on walls. You know this about me. He did know that about her. I work construction all week, he said. I don't know that I want to do it on weekends too. It's different when it's for something, Mia said, with the confidence of someone who had never swung a hammer but was certain about the philosophy. Lucas said he'd think about it, which both of them understood to mean he probably would, because Mia had correctly identified that her father needed to be doing something with his hands when he had too much empty time and thinking space, and she had inherited enough of her mother's strategic intelligence to know exactly when to plant an idea and when to leave it alone. She left it alone. 3 days later, Lucas called the Foundation's volunteer line and signed up for the Saturday workshop build-out. The project took 4 Saturdays to complete. Lucas showed up the first morning expecting to be one of a dozen people and found instead 6 volunteers, 2 of whom had never used a drill, one of whom had strong opinions about load-bearing walls that were not grounded in any structural knowledge Lucas could identify, and a Foundation staff coordinator named Joel, who was excellent at organizing people in spreadsheets and somewhat less excellent at reading a tape measure. Lucas quietly took over the technical end of things on the first morning without making a point of doing so, which was how he operated on every job site. You figured out what needed doing and you did it, and you didn't spend a lot of time on the hierarchy of who was supposed to be doing what. By the second Saturday, Joel had stopped pretending to read the tape measure and had started just handing it to Lucas. By the third Saturday, Lucas knew the names of all the other volunteers and had fixed a light fixture in the hallway that had been flickering for apparently 6 months. By the fourth Saturday, the workshop space was finished, clean, functional, shelves along 2 walls, good overhead lighting, a workbench along the back that Lucas had built from lumber Joel ordered based on a list Lucas wrote on a napkin. And the Foundation staff came in and looked at it, and there was a small, genuine moment of people being pleased about something they'd made together. Sophia wasn't there for any of those 4 Saturdays. Lucas was not keeping track of whether she was there. He was aware that she wasn't, in the same peripheral way you're aware of background noise that's absent. He was not keeping track. She appeared on the 5th Saturday, which was not a build-out Saturday, those were done, but a community garden Saturday, which Lucas had also signed up for because apparently Mia's comment about doing something for something had gotten under his skin more than he'd admitted. He was crouched near the far end of the garden plot, helping an older woman named Vera work out why a section of irrigation tubing wasn't draining properly, when he heard Sophia's voice from somewhere behind him. She was talking to Joel, something about the new workshop space, and her voice had the same quality he remembered from the ceremony. Clear, direct, no wasted words. He didn't turn around. He fixed the irrigation tubing, which had a kink in it from where someone had placed a brick too close, and he listened to Vera explain her theory of what tomatoes wanted from the soil, which was detailed and slightly mystical, and he liked her very much. Lucas. He looked up. Sophia had come around the end of the garden plot and was on the path that ran alongside it, her wheelchair navigating the packed gravel surface without trouble. She was in a dark green jacket, and her hair was down, which was different from the ceremony, and she looked not exactly relaxed, but something adjacent to it, less armored. "Ms. Ashcroft," he said. "Sophia," she said, the way you correct someone when you've told them once before and they've forgotten or chosen not to use it. "Joel tells me you built the workshop." 6 people built the workshop. "Joel tells me you built the workshop," she said again, with a slight emphasis that meant she'd gotten an accurate account of what actually happened. "Joel is generous with credit," Lucas said. "Joel is specific about credit," Sophia said. "There's a difference." She looked at the garden bed he was crouching next to. "What was wrong with it?" "Kinked tube. Someone put a brick on it." "That would be me," Vera said, without apology. "I needed somewhere to set my coffee." Sophia looked at Vera, and something lit up in her face, a genuine amusement that she didn't try to modulate. "Fair enough," she said, "as long as it works now." "It works now," Lucas said. He stood up, because crouching while someone else was at eye level was a social habit he'd never been comfortable with. He found himself briefly aware that this had to be recalibrated, that Sophia's eye level was from the chair, that he was now the taller one in the conversation regardless of what he did, and that this was simply the reality of it and didn't require any comment or performance of unawareness. He just stood and looked at her normally. She looked back at him normally, which he understood meant she was used to parsing whether people were being weird about it, and had concluded he wasn't. "I'm glad you've been coming," she said. "We needed someone who knew what they were doing." "Vera knows what she's doing," Lucas said. "Different domain." "I certainly do," Vera said, and moved further down the garden bed with her trowel and her opinions about tomatoes. Sophia watched her go, then looked back at Lucas. The familiar face puzzle was still there. He could see it occasionally surfacing, a slight working behind the eyes quality, when she looked at him directly, like a word she couldn't quite retrieve. He hadn't told her. He still wasn't sure why. Partly because it seemed like the kind of thing that could become awkward fast. "Hi, I was watching you cry in a bakery parking lot, and I paid for your cake anonymously, and now here we are." Partly because whatever connection had started between them at the ceremony had its own quality, its own weight, and he didn't want to introduce something complicated before he understood what the uncomplicated version of it was. Partly because he'd told the bakery not to reveal his name, and there was something in him that didn't want to undercut his own reason for doing it that way. "You have another volunteer session in 2 weeks, Sophia said. "I was hoping you might want to take a look at the plumbing situation in the East bathroom before then. Joel says it's been an issue for a while." "I'm not a plumber," Lucas said. "You're better than nothing," Joel says. "Joel's not wrong," Lucas said. "Sure, I can take a look. Sometime this week, if that works." She paused. "I'm usually here Tuesday and Thursday afternoons." He noticed the specificity of that, the particular afternoon she was there, and said nothing about it. "Tuesday works," he said. "I'll let Joel know." She went back to the main path, nodding to Vera on her way, and Lucas watched her go and then turned back to the garden bed and crouched down again to check that the tubing was fully seated. "She likes you," Vera said, without looking up from her tomato plants. "We just met," Lucas said. "I'm 73, Vera said. "I know what I'm looking at." Lucas didn't answer that, and Vera didn't push it, and they worked side by side in the thin morning sun until it was time to pack up. Tuesday, he came by in the early afternoon with a pipe wrench he owned and a flashlight, and he spent 40 minutes in the East bathroom diagnosing a slow drain that turned out to be a partially collapsed joint under the floor. Not a quick fix, needed a real plumber, which he told Joel along with the name of a plumber he trusted and an approximate cost estimate. Joel seemed both relieved to know the problem and anxious about the budget, and Lucas said he could help with some of the labor side if they wanted to bring costs down, and Joel said he'd check with Sophia. He was back in the hallway washing his hands at the utility sink when Sophia appeared from the direction of the main office. "Joel said you figured it out," she said. "Needs a licensed plumber for the main fix. I can help with the surround work. I'll pay you. I volunteer here." "That was for the workshop project," she said. "This is skilled work." "I volunteer here," he said again, not combatively, just clearly. "Let me help." She looked at him for a moment with the particular expression he was starting to recognize as her way of deciding whether to push back on something. She had a habit of not conceding quickly, which he didn't mind. He'd rather have someone push back honestly than fold out of politeness. "Okay," she said. "Thank you. The plumber's name is Darren Cho. He's good, and he won't overcharge you." "Joel's writing it down." She paused. "Do you have time for a cup of coffee? We have a kitchen." "I have until 3, he said. "That's almost an hour." "I know," he said. The foundation's kitchen was small and functional, a gas range and a commercial coffee maker and a table that seated 6 but currently had stacks of file folders on 4 of the chairs. Sophia moved 2 of them to the counter, and Lucas took the other chair, and she poured coffee from a pot that had been sitting long enough to be past its best, and neither of them mentioned the quality. They talked for nearly the full hour. Lucas wasn't sure afterward how to account for the time. It hadn't felt like a structured conversation, more like the way conversations went when both people were paying attention and neither was performing. They talked about the Foundation's programs and how some of them worked better than others, and which ones Sophia was considering expanding. They talked about Mia's arts program, and Lucas mentioned that Mia had come home with a painting she'd done in purple and orange that was either a landscape or a dragon. She hadn't specified. Sophia laughed, and again it was real. He noticed that her real laughs were always a little surprised, like she hadn't been expecting to find something funny. At one point she said, "Can I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "In Mia's essay," she said. "She wrote about her mother. I don't want to intrude on anything, but I wondered how you, She stopped. "I'm not sure what I'm asking." "How do I manage it?" Lucas said. "How do you seem so, not okay, that's not the right word, intact. You seem intact." He thought about that. He didn't answer immediately, which he noticed she seemed comfortable with. She didn't fill the silence, just waited. "I don't think I have a satisfying answer," he said. "Time is part of it. Mia is a big part of it. And I don't know, a long stretch early on where I was not intact at all. I was pretty bad for a while. I just wasn't bad in public." She was quiet for a moment. "That," she said, "I understand." He looked at her. She was looking at her coffee cup, turning it slightly, and there was something in her face that was more open than it usually was, less managed. "The accident," he said. Not a question, just a place to put it if she wanted to. She looked up. "What did you know about it?" "Nothing specific. Joel mentioned you'd had a hard year personally. That was all." "The accident was 2 years ago," she said. "Wet road, a truck that ran a light. Standard story in a way. The kind of thing that happens to people every day. And then you're in surgery for 11 hours and you wake up and someone is explaining to you what is and isn't going to be the same." She said it without inflection, the way people talk about things they've described often enough that the surface has worn smooth. "And then," she continued, "you have a company. You have people who need you to be okay. So you figure out how to look okay, and you do that. And at some point, the looking okay and the being okay are hard to tell apart." "Do they ever come apart?" Lucas said. She looked at him, direct. "Occasionally." He nodded. He understood that she wasn't going to say more than that, and he didn't need her to. "For what it's worth," he said, "you seem pretty intact yourself." "I have good days," she said. "Today's a good day." "What makes today a good day?" She thought about it. "The bathroom situation is actually diagnosable. Vera thinks the tomatoes are going to make it. And someone brought decent cookies to the staff meeting this morning." She paused. "Also this coffee, despite everything." "The coffee is terrible," Lucas said. "It really is," she agreed. He drove home and did not analyze the conversation in any active way. He thought about it, the same way you turn a smooth stone in your hand without necessarily studying it. He thought about the phrase intact, and about the way she'd used it, and about the moment she'd said that I understand. The quickness of it, like recognition. He thought about the fact that there was a version of this conversation he could have had with almost no one else, and that he hadn't had a conversation like that in a long time. He thought about Claire briefly, the way he always did when something shifted. Not with grief exactly, more like the habit of checking in, the way you glance toward a chair where someone used to sit even after the chair has been moved. He thought she would have liked Sophia. That was a thought that surprised him enough that he noticed it, parked in his own driveway, engine running, dark coming in early the way it did in late October. He turned off the engine and went inside. Over the next 6 weeks, he was at the foundation most Tuesdays and at least one day on weekends. There was always something, the plumbing project with Darren the plumber, then shelving in the new workshop, then a drainage issue in the garden that turned out to be related to the original irrigation problem Vera had helpfully created. Joel had stopped treating him like a volunteer and had started texting him directly when something came up, which Lucas accepted without comment. He saw Sophia most Tuesdays. Sometimes they had coffee. Sometimes they talked while he worked and she managed calls or reviewed documents nearby. She had the ability to do 2 things at once in a way that was impressive without being showy, carrying on a real conversation while simultaneously working through whatever was on her screen. He came to understand that this was just how her mind operated, parallel, efficient, with no apparent need to explain itself. He also came to understand slowly things she didn't say directly. She worked too much. Not in the way people said it admiringly about ambitious people, genuinely too much, the kind that had clearly been a coping mechanism at some point and had calcified into habit. She arrived at the foundation before anyone else and left after the staff. And he once texted Joel about a parts order at 9 in the evening, and Joel replied immediately with the answer, which meant Joel was also still at the foundation, which meant Sophia almost certainly was too. She didn't talk about anyone waiting at home. She talked about her company. The situation had stabilized, she mentioned once. with the tone of someone for whom stability was a relief rather than a satisfaction, and about the foundation, and about whatever was happening in front of them. She asked questions about his work, about Mia, about his life with the same direct attention she brought to everything, and she listened the way good listeners do. Like what you were saying mattered, and she wasn't waiting for her turn to talk. But she deflected anything personal about herself with a speed and smoothness that he recognized, because he'd done it himself for years after Claire. She would answer, and the answer would be technically honest, and then she would redirect, a skill so practiced she probably didn't notice she was doing it. He noticed. He didn't push. He understood that kind of wall, where it came from and how long it took to come down. He just kept showing up, kept being himself in whatever room she was also in, and trusted that some things happened on their own schedule or they didn't happen at all. The conversation that changed things was not a big one. It happened on a Tuesday in December early evening, when most of the staff had gone and Lucas was finishing a last few things in the workshop, and Sophia came in to get something from the shelf near the door. It was cold outside and the building's old heating was inconsistent, and her hands were wrapped around a mug, and she looked tired in a real way, not a managed way, the kind of tired that gets through the armor. "You should go home," he said. She looked at him. "You're still here." "I'm finishing something. You've been here since 8 this morning." She looked mildly startled that he knew that, then recovered. "I had meetings." "You're allowed to stop," he said. "For the day. You're allowed to just stop for the day." Something crossed her face, a quick movement, like something flinching from light. "I don't—" She stopped, started again. "It's easier to be here." He waited. "At home it's quiet," she said. "Here there's always something. Here I'm—" She stopped again and looked at her mug. "I don't know what I am at home." Lucas set down the screwdriver he'd been holding. He leaned back against the workbench and looked at her and didn't say anything for a moment, because this was the first time she'd said something that was exactly true without buffering it first. "I know that feeling," he said. "After Claire?" "For a long time after." "How did you fix it?" "I didn't fix it," he said. I got used to the quiet in increments. Mia helped. She's very bad at being quiet." Something shifted in Sophia's face, not quite a smile, but the shape of one. "She is," she agreed. She'd met Mia twice now, once when Lucas had brought her to the foundation on a Saturday, once when Mia had come to pick up her arts program supplies, and marched directly up to Sophia and told her the workshop was, and this was a quote, extremely professional looking, with the gravity of a very small building inspector. "She inspected every shelf," Sophia said. "She has standards. She told me the spacing was good." A real smile now. "I felt very evaluated." "She liked you," Lucas said. "She told me specifically." Sophia looked at him. "What did she say?" He considered. Mia had actually said, "She's really pretty, and also she seems like she's used to being in charge, but not in an annoying way, which is hard to pull off." He decided on a paraphrase. "She said you seemed like someone who knew what she was doing," he said. "She means that as the highest compliment." Sophia was quiet for a moment. She turned the mug in her hands the way she did when she was processing something. The workshop was warm from the heat lamp in the corner, and the overhead lights, and the general warmth of the building. And outside the window, the December dark had fully arrived, and the room felt insulated from things. Complete. "Lucas," she said. "Yeah." "Where do I know you from?" He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the puzzle fully surfaced now, no longer a background thing, but in the front of her expression, insistent. "I've been trying to place it for weeks. It's not the school. It's not the hardware store. It's somewhere specific, a specific moment." He could have deflected. He was good at deflecting when he wanted to be. He looked at her for a moment and thought about the bakery, and the pink cake, and the way she'd held it in her lap in the parking lot, and the way she'd looked coming through the door of the bakery, spine straight, jaw set, refusing to let anyone see. "We were in the same place once," he said. "A few months ago." She waited. "A bakery on Clement Street." He watched her face. She went very still. Not dramatically, just that quality of stillness where someone has stopped all peripheral processing and is only doing one thing. "October," she said slowly. "Yeah." "My birthday." "Yeah." The stillness held. Her eyes moved over his face in a different way than they had before, Not looking for the memory anymore, but sitting with having found it. You were at the corner table, she said. I was. I didn't notice you. I was. She stopped. You were handling something, he said. You weren't looking around. She was quiet for a long moment. Something was moving behind her expression. He couldn't read all of it, which was unusual for him. There was something that might have been the beginning of a question she wasn't sure she wanted the answer to. She asked it anyway. The Community Appreciation Program, she said. He didn't answer, and his not answering was itself an answer. She looked at him. He looked back at her and waited. That was you, she said. Yes. The word fell into the room and sat there. Outside, a car passed on the street, headlights briefly crossing the window. The heat lamp ticked. Sophia took a breath, slow and deliberate, the kind that someone takes when they're deciding something about how they're going to respond to something. Her hands were still wrapped around the mug, and he noticed she was holding it tighter than before. You told them not to give your name, she said. Yes. Why? He thought about how to answer that. He thought about his father, about the difference between gestures that were for the person and gestures that were for the audience. He thought about the moment in the bakery when he'd put money on the counter and walked back to his table and finished his coffee and left. Because I didn't do it for a reason that required your knowing, he said. Her jaw tightened slightly. Not in anger, in the way of someone pressing against a feeling that's bigger than they expected. That morning, she said carefully, was a very bad morning. I know, I could see that. She stopped. Her voice was steady, but it was doing work to stay that way. I had been holding a lot of things together for a long time, and that morning something small gave way and I couldn't fix it before I got there, and I walked in and canceled the cake because I couldn't justify it, and I felt. She stopped again. He didn't move. He didn't fill the silence with reassurance, which was something she seemed to register. I felt invisible, she said. That's the word. I felt invisible in the way that you feel when you've been visible in all the wrong ways for so long that you can't remember if anyone has actually seen you. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment. And then you did that, she said, and I didn't know who. I just knew that someone had looked at me, not the CEO, not the woman in the wheelchair, just me, and decided I deserved something. You did, he said. You do. Her eyes held his, and there was something in her face that was completely unguarded in a way he hadn't seen from her before. Not performed openness, not managed vulnerability, just her, looking at him, with the full weight of everything she'd just said still in the air between them. I ate the cake by myself in my office, she said, and there was something small and wry in her voice underneath the emotion. I got a fork from the kitchen, and I ate a piece standing at my desk. Was it good? It was very good cake, she said, and it was my birthday and I was alone, and somehow it was also okay. That was. Her voice caught, briefly, and she pushed through it. That was because of you. Lucas didn't know what to do with that. He looked down at his hands for a moment. He wasn't good at receiving things. He was better at giving them, always had been, and this was the kind of moment where receiving something required actually holding still and not deflecting back. He held still. I'm glad, he said. I'm glad it mattered. She nodded once and looked away, and the moment passed into something quieter. Not resolved, but settled, the way things settle when you've said the true thing and now you're both just living alongside it. After a while, she said, You should have told me earlier. Maybe, he said. You're not going to apologize for it. No. She looked at him again. The wry quality was back in her expression, which he had come to understand was how she managed things after they'd gotten real. A small retreat into lightness, not to erase the weight of what had been said, but to make it possible to continue existing in the room with it. Well, she said, you have terrible communication instincts, I've been told. And you owe me a proper cup of coffee, she said, because this is, she lifted her mug, genuinely bad. There's a place 2 blocks from here that's open late, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she set her mug down on the workbench. Get your jacket, she said. He got his jacket. He held the workshop door and she went through, and they went out into the December night together. And the cold came in clean and the city was bright in the way cities are at night in winter, all reflected light and moving traffic, and the smell of something cooking somewhere nearby. And they walked, her on the path, him beside her, 2 blocks to a coffee place with warm lighting and actual good coffee and 2 small tables by the window. And they sat for an hour in the kind of conversation that goes in directions neither person planned, that ends later than either person expected, that leaves you slightly different than you were when it started. He did not plan any of it. He did not try to make it into something while it was happening. He just sat across from her and talked and listened, and at one point she laughed at something he said and didn't seem surprised that she was laughing, which felt like something. At 10 o'clock she said she had a 7 a.m. call, and he said he had a job at 6:30, and they sat for another 15 minutes anyway. When they finally said goodnight on the sidewalk outside, she looked at him with an expression he didn't have a clean name for. Something layered, something that was made of the evening and the workshop and the bakery, and 6 weeks of Tuesday coffees, and the thing she'd said about feeling invisible, and the thing he'd said about holding still. "Lucas," she said. "Yeah." "Thank you," she said. "For the cake. For all of it." He nodded. She turned toward where her car was parked, and he stood for a moment in the cold watching her go, and then he walked in the other direction to his truck, and he drove home through the lit city, and he did not tell himself it was nothing, because it wasn't nothing, and he had learned a long time ago that pretending things were nothing they weren't was its own kind of damage. He drove home, and he went to bed, and he slept better than he had in a while. Better than he had in a while. The coffee place 2 blocks from the foundation became a Tuesday thing. Not immediately, and not by any explicit agreement. It happened the way certain things between two cautious people happen, incrementally and without ceremony, each step small enough that neither person had to fully acknowledge they were taking it. The week after the workshop conversation, Lucas finished up late again and Sophia was still in her office, and he knocked on the open door and said he was heading out, and she looked up from her screen and said, "Give me 5 minutes," and that was that. The week after, she was already in her jacket when he came down the hall. They didn't talk about what it was. Lucas didn't name things before he understood them, and Sophia, he was learning, had a specific aversion to conversations that required defining things before they were ready to be defined. She operated on precision in professional contexts, but had learned, probably the hard way, to leave certain personal things deliberately unpinned. So they walked 2 blocks on Tuesday evenings, and they sat at the table by the window and they talked for an hour, sometimes longer, about whatever came up, and nobody called it anything, and that was fine. What Lucas noticed, accumulating over those weeks like sediment settling at the bottom of still water, was Sophia. Not the version he'd been assembling from the outside, the CEO, the foundation chairwoman, the woman who walked into rooms and commanded them without trying to, but the version that appeared at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday when the coffee had gone cold and there was nobody left to manage. She was funny. That was the first surprise, and he felt mildly embarrassed that it surprised him, as though he'd unconsciously bought some narrative about her being too controlled for humor. She was dry and specific, and occasionally self-deprecating in a way that had real teeth. Not the performed self-deprecation that successful people used to seem relatable, but the actual thing, the kind that came from genuine self-knowledge and didn't need anyone to reassure her. She was also, underneath the competence and the directness and the walls she'd built and maintained with considerable skill, deeply uncertain about the things that mattered most. He caught it in small ways. The way she talked about her company's recovery. With pride, yes, but also a threading anxiety underneath. A sense that stability was something she had to actively hold rather than something she could trust. The way she referenced her physical therapist with the slightly detached tone people used about things they were complying with but had not fully made peace with. The way she talked about the accident itself, when it came up, always in terms of what she'd had to adapt or overcome, never in terms of what it had cost her emotionally. As if the emotional cost was a room in the house she was keeping locked. He didn't push on the locked room. He knew what that was like. But he noticed. The evening she told him about the year after the accident, it wasn't planned. They'd been talking about something else. A logistics problem with a foundation program. Something mundane. And then there was a pause, and she looked out the window at the street, and she said quietly, "I didn't leave my apartment for 3 months." Lucas didn't say anything. "After the surgeries," she said, "after the rehab facility, I came home to my apartment and I had a home care aide and a physical therapist who came 3 times a week, and I conducted board meetings over video, and I didn't go outside." She paused. "I told myself it was practical. recovery. Too much energy required. All of that was true. But it was also that I didn't want anyone to see me. See you. In the chair. She said it plainly. I know how that sounds. I know what the correct, healthy attitude toward disability is supposed to be. I've said the correct things in interviews. I believe some of them. She looked at him. But that's not what I felt. What I felt was that I had been a specific kind of person in the world. I moved in a certain way. I took up space in a certain way. And that person was gone. And I didn't know who the new one was yet, and I wasn't willing to figure that out in public. Lucas turned his coffee cup in his hands. That's not wrong, he said. It's not sustainable either. No, but it's not wrong. She looked at him as though she'd expected a different response. Most people tell me I should have reached out, that isolating was harmful. You survived it, he said. So, barely, she said, quietly enough that he understood it wasn't hyperbole. He absorbed that without reacting visibly, the way he absorbed things that required real care, not by performing calmness, but by actually going quiet inside and giving the thing room. What changed? He said. Warren, she said, her CFO. He showed up at my apartment with the company's quarterly projections and a terrible sandwich from a deli near the office, and he sat on my couch and spread papers all over my coffee table, and he didn't treat me like someone who needed to be handled. He just worked. In my space. Like it was normal. She paused. He came back the next week, and the week after, and at some point I started getting dressed before he arrived. Lucas smiled, just slightly. Sometimes that's how it works. Someone just shows up, she said, without making it a thing. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back at him, and he could see her register what she'd just said, and the connection she was making to something else, to the bakery, to him, to the particular quality of how he'd been present without making any of it a thing. She didn't say it out loud. He didn't point it out. But it sat between them, understood. Well, December gave way to January with the usual abruptness. One week the city was strung with lights, and the coffee place had holly on the counter, and then the decorations came down and it was just winter, gray and stripped down and honest. Lucas and Mia had spent Christmas quietly, their tradition for the past several years. The two of them, his sister and her family over video call, a meal that Lucas cooked and Mia loudly supervised, and a movie of Mia's choosing that was always animated and always involved at least one sequence where Lucas suspected he was expected to find something emotionally affecting in what was technically a children's film. He always did. He had learned not to be embarrassed about this. This year, on Christmas Eve, Mia had said, almost as an aside, "Do you think Sophia has people?" Lucas had been chopping onions, a task he was using with full emotional cover. What do you mean? For Christmas. Like, does she have family and stuff? I don't know, Lucas said. Which was true. He knew she'd mentioned a brother once, vaguely, and parents who lived out of state, and nothing that suggested a strong local network. You could ask her, Mia said. I could. Are you going to? I'm chopping onions. That's not an answer. Mia. She let it drop, but in the way she let things drop when she'd already made her point and knew it had landed. He had texted Sophia on Christmas morning. Nothing elaborate, just Merry Christmas. Hope it's a good day. She'd responded 20 minutes later with, you too. Maya get everything she wanted, and then a photo, sent apparently without overthinking it, of her own Christmas situation. A small apartment with a decent-sized tree, a mug of something, a laptop open on the coffee table with what appeared to be a spreadsheet. He'd looked at the photo for a moment. A spreadsheet on Christmas morning. He thought about Warren showing up with a terrible sandwich. He'd texted back, closed the laptop. A pause. Then, it's just one thing. It'll be there tomorrow. A longer pause. Then, fine. He'd smiled at his phone and gone back to making breakfast. The thing with Mia happened in late January, and it wasn't dramatic. No single confrontation, no breakdown, no moment that announced itself as significant in real time. It was smaller and more complicated than that. Mia had been quieter than usual for about a week. Lucas noticed because he always noticed with Mia, but he'd learned the difference between the quiet that needed immediate attention and the quiet that needed space, and this felt like the second kind. He gave her space. He made sure food appeared at regular intervals, and that the apartment was warm and that he was visibly, consistently there without being hovering. On Thursday evening, she came and sat at the kitchen table while he was doing dishes, which was her way of signaling she wanted to talk but wasn't going to initiate it. He dried his hands and sat across from her and waited. "Mom's birthday is next week," she said. "I know. I was thinking about her today. At school." "What were you thinking?" Mia looked at her hands on the table, picked at a small callus on her palm that she'd gotten from the pottery class at the arts program. "I was trying to remember her voice," she said, "and I couldn't. I could remember stuff about her, but not her voice." Lucas didn't move. "Is that bad?" Mia said. "No," he said. "It happens." "Does it happen to you?" He thought about the honest answer. "The voice was one of the first things for me, too," he said. "But her laugh, that one I still have. I don't know why that one stayed." Mia considered this with the seriousness she brought to important information. "I have her laugh," she said. "You do," he said. "You have her exact laugh." That sat for a moment. "Dad," Mia said. "Yeah." "Is it okay that I like Sophia?" He looked at his daughter. She was looking back at him with the full directness she used when she was asking something that had been building pressure for a while, clear-eyed, slightly braced, the way people look when they're not sure the answer is going to be what they want, but they need the answer anyway. "Of course it's okay," he said. "I don't mean like a regular person I like," Mia said. "I mean like, I think about her sometimes, like if she's had a good day, stuff like that." Lucas held very still, not from discomfort, but from the particular alertness of a parent receiving something that required precision. "I think that's fine," he said carefully. "Does it mean I'm replacing Mom?" "No," he said, with the certainty that the question deserved. "It means your heart has more than one room in it, which is a good thing. That's not a defect." Mia's eyes had gone shiny, and she blinked twice in rapid succession, a gesture so like Claire that Lucas felt a familiar wave move through him, quick, deep, and then receding. "Okay," Mia said in a small voice. "You can like whoever you like," he said. "You don't have to ration it." She nodded. She wiped her eye with the back of her hand in the brisk, no-nonsense way she handled her own tears, as if they were a procedural matter to be resolved efficiently. "Also," she said, recovering, "Sophia's really cool, like, objectively." "Objectively," Lucas said. "She runs a whole company and a foundation, and she doesn't act like that's a big deal, which is actually what makes it a big deal." "That's a perceptive observation." "I know," Mia said. "Can we have ice cream? It's January. Ice cream is not seasonal." He got up and got ice cream. Potet. He told Sophia about the conversation, some of it, the following Tuesday. Not the part about the voice, that felt like Mia's private thing to carry, but the part about liking her, and what Mia had asked, and what he'd said. Sophia was quiet for a moment after he finished. "What did she say when you answered?" she asked. "She said you were objectively cool and then asked for ice cream." Sophia pressed her lips together, and he could see her fighting the smile and losing it. Smart kid. "Best person I know. I've mentioned this." "You have." She turned her cup on the table. "Lucas." "Yeah. I think about her too," she said. "Whether she's had a good day, what she's working on at the arts program, what she's going to say next time I see her, because she always has a position on something, and the position is always either exactly right or completely insane, and it's impossible to know in advance which one." He laughed. It was true. "I just want to say that out loud," Sophia said. "So it's said." "Okay," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. There was something that needed to be said next, and they both knew what it was, and neither of them said it yet, and that was its own kind of understanding. The recognition that some things were better approached without hurry. "Tuesday is my favorite day of the week," she said finally, which was not the thing, exactly, but it was adjacent to it, and it was honest, and it was enough for right now. "Mine too," he said. February arrived, and with it a crisis at Sophia's company that had nothing to do with the ongoing recovery and everything to do with a software vulnerability that one of her senior developers discovered in a client-facing system. It required 3 days of all-hands response, Sophia in her office until midnight 2 nights running, a PR containment effort that Warren managed with his usual spreadsheet-based approach to disaster, and a client communication process that Sophia ran personally because she believed, as a matter of principle, that bad news should come from the person accountable for it. Lucas knew about it because she texted him at 11 on the first night. Crisis at work. May miss Tuesday. He'd texted back, let me know if you need anything. She'd sent back a single, you can't fix software vulnerabilities. And he'd replied, I can bring food. And she hadn't responded for 2 hours and then sent, Foundation Kitchen, tomorrow 7 p.m. if you can. He brought food, takeout from a Thai place on Dunmore that Mia had declared the best restaurant in the city after extensive research, which meant she had been there twice and both times ordered the same thing and loved it. He brought enough for 4 people because he didn't know who else would be there, and he defaulted to too much. It was just Sophia. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop and 3 coffee cups in various stages of abandonment, and she looked like someone who had been running on cortisol and cold coffee for 48 hours, which was exactly what she was. She looked up when he came in and did not pretend she wasn't relieved to see him, which he noted as a small marker of something having shifted between them. She no longer worked to look fine in front of him. How bad is it? He asked, setting the food on the counter. Contained, she said. We caught it before any client data was actually accessed. But the vulnerability existed for 4 months and we didn't find it. And that's... She stopped. That's on me. You found it eventually. A developer found it, and I should have had better detection protocols in place. She pulled off the container lids with slightly more force than was needed. I do not want reassurance right now. I just want to be annoyed about it. Okay, he said, and handed her a fork, and sat across from her and opened his own container. They ate in silence for a while, which was a different kind of silence than the silences of their Tuesday conversations. More worn, more plain, the silence of 2 people who had been in each other's company enough that quiet didn't require filling. After a while, Sophia said, How was your day? Replaced a subfloor in a house on Kenmore, he said. Dry rot. Previous owner had covered it with tile so it looked fine until you stepped in the wrong spot. She looked at him. That's extremely metaphorical. I spend a lot of time around things that look fine until they're not, he said. Occupational observation. Am I the house with the dry rot or the person who didn't notice? He considered this. I don't think that's where the metaphor goes. She was quiet for a moment. I feel like I should have caught it, she said, and he understood that they'd moved back to the software vulnerability, but that it wasn't really only about the software vulnerability. I feel like I should be better at catching things before they become problems. You catch a lot of things. Not this. One, he said. This one. You're doing the reassurance thing. I'm doing the math thing, he said. It's different. She looked at him with the exasperated expression she sometimes wore when he said something she couldn't argue with and found that irritating. He was used to it. He found it privately quite good. Eat your food, he said. She ate her food. Afterward, when the containers were cleared and the laptop was closed, she'd closed it without prompting, which he counted. They sat in the Foundation Kitchen in the specific quiet of late evening in a building that had been full of people 12 hours earlier and was now empty. The overhead fluorescent had a slight flicker that nobody had fixed yet, and the heating made its usual sounds, and outside the window the February night pressed in cold and still. Lucas? Sophia said. Yeah. She was looking at her hands on the table, and when she looked up there was something different in her expression. Not the managed version, not the professional version, not even the tired version from the past 2 days. Something more stripped. I haven't been... She stopped, started differently. For a long time after the accident, I decided that needing people was something I couldn't afford. I told myself it was efficiency, that I had limited energy, and I had to allocate it, and depending on someone was a liability I couldn't carry. She paused. I was also, if I'm honest, afraid that if someone got close enough to see the whole picture, they'd... She didn't finish. They'd leave, Lucas said, or they'd stay out of something that wasn't... She stopped. Out of something that wasn't actually what I wanted from them. He understood that. He had watched people stay in his life after Claire out of guilt or obligation or the particular discomfort of not knowing what else to do, and he had learned to recognize that specific quality of presence and how little it actually fed anything. You know that's not what this is, he said. She looked at him. Do I? You've been watching me for 4 months, he said. You tell me what you see. Something in her face opened. It was subtle. She was not a person who did dramatic openings. But he caught it. I see someone who keeps showing up, she said. Not because he's supposed to, not because he wants something, just, he said. Just because, she said. He nodded. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know what to do with that, she said. I'm working on it. I know, he said. I'm not in a hurry. You should be in a hurry, she said, and there was something that was almost humor in it, almost exasperation. I'm a lot of work. Sophia, he said. What? I spent 3 years rebuilding a life after losing someone I loved more than anything. I raised a kid through grief while I was in my own grief. I have had approximately zero hurry left in me for years. He looked at her evenly. So when I say I'm not in a hurry, I mean it as a specific and informed position. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked away, at the window, at the dark outside. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, he said. The shift that happened over the following weeks was not a single shift, but a series of them, small and irregular, the way ice changes before it breaks. Sophia stopped deflecting when he asked her direct questions. Not all at once, there were still moments when the old habit kicked in and she redirected, and he let her, and sometimes she came back to the original question on her own, and sometimes she didn't, and both were fine. But the baseline moved. She started answering more of herself when they talked, and the person he got access to in those answers was someone who surprised him regularly, sharper and softer than the public version, more specifically funny, more specifically afraid of certain things, more interesting than anyone he'd spent sustained time with in years. She told him about her parents, who were good people and who did not know how to talk to her since the accident, who came to visit twice a year and spent the visits being very careful with her in ways that made her feel both loved and exhausted. She told him about the brother, Marcus, who lived in another city and called every Sunday and never mentioned the wheelchair and just talked to her the way he'd always talked to her, which was sometimes annoying and always a relief. She told him once, late on a Tuesday, that the hardest part wasn't the physical adjustment. That was hard, she said, and it remained hard, but it was concrete and you could work at it concretely. The hardest part was the way it had changed how she understood herself in relation to other people. She had built her identity in large part around independence, around not needing, around being the one who had the answer and made the call and held the weight. And the accident had made certain kinds of independence impossible and had forced her to need things from people in ways she hadn't before, and she had not made peace with that. I don't think making peace with it is actually the goal, Lucas said. She looked at him. What's the goal? I think the goal is just doing it, needing things, without it meaning something's wrong with you. Easy to say. I know, I'm bad at it too. He paused. I went 1.5 years after Claire without asking anyone for anything. I was so convinced that asking meant I couldn't handle it, and handling it was the whole proof I needed that I was okay, that Mia was okay. He looked at the table. My sister had to basically force me to let her come and stay for a month. I was so stubborn about it that she showed up with luggage and told me she was staying, and I argued with her on the front step for 10 minutes, and she just waited me out. What changed your mind? She'd been on a plane for 6 hours, he said. I wasn't going to make her sleep on the step. Sophia laughed, and then he laughed. And the thing about the laughing was that it was real, and it was also about something real, and it opened a small space in the conversation that was lighter without being shallow. I have Warren, she said. He's my version of your sister. The sandwich man. He would hate that characterization, she said. He's deeply committed to being perceived as unsentimental. How's he actually doing with that? Terribly, she said. He cried at a retirement party for one of our developers last spring and tried to claim he had dry eyes. Bilateral situation, Lucas said. She pointed at him. Exactly. Us. March brought Mia's arts program showcase, an exhibition in the community center's main gallery space, work from all the students, families invited. Lucas pressed his good shirt, and Mia spent 45 minutes on her hair, and they drove over on a Saturday afternoon under a sky that had started to consider spring without committing to it. The gallery was warm and crowded in the pleasant way of things, attended by people who are there because they want to be. Mia's piece was a large mixed-media painting in that orange and purple she favored. It was, she had finally clarified, both a landscape and a dragon, which was a creative decision she defended with considerable confidence when anyone asked. Lucas stood in front of it for a while. What do you think? Mia asked beside him. I think I don't fully understand it, he said, and I think that's the point. That is literally the point, she said. Phoebe says art isn't supposed to resolve. Phoebe is right. I know. Mia looked at her painting with the slight distance of an artist evaluating finished work. I like the bottom left section best, the dragon part. I like the top right, he said, the landscape part. It's one thing, she said patiently. I know, he said. That's why I like the top right. She looked at him like he might be getting it, and she wasn't sure how she felt about that, which was one of his favorite expressions in her repertoire. Sophia arrived 30 minutes into the showcase. He saw her from across the room. She'd come straight from something, still in professional clothes, jacket and slacks, and she'd apologized in a text 20 minutes earlier for running late. Something about a call that went long. She found them in the gallery without difficulty, navigated across the room, and when Mia saw her, Mia's whole face changed in the way faces change for people we are genuinely happy to see, uncomplicated and immediate. You came, Mia said. I said I would, Sophia said, with the slight edge of someone who does not miss commitments and wants that to be understood. Then, more warmly, show me your piece. Mia took her to it and explained it. Light the dragon, the landscape, the decision to make them the same thing, the specific choices about the color in the lower left, the way the texture changed across the middle. And Sophia listened with full attention, asking questions that were real questions, not the encouraging adult kind. She asked about the decision to use texture in one section and flatness in another, and Mia had an answer, and Sophia engaged with the answer, and Lucas stood slightly to the side watching his daughter be taken seriously and felt something settle in his chest. Afterward, Phoebe came over to meet Sophia. She'd heard about the chairwoman, everyone who worked with the foundation knew who Sophia was, and Mia introduced them with the faint proprietary pride of someone presenting two important things to each other. Phoebe said Mia was the most opinionated student she'd ever had, and she meant it entirely as a compliment, and Mia stood up straighter. Later, when Mia was talking to other kids and Lucas was standing with a cup of punch near the window, Sophia came and stopped beside him. She's extraordinary, Sophia said. I know, he said, without any false modesty, because it was just true. You did that. She did most of it herself. You gave her the space to, Sophia said. That's not nothing. That's actually most of it. He looked at her. She was looking at Mia across the room, and her expression was the open one, the one that only appeared when she wasn't paying attention to managing it. Thank you for coming, he said. I wanted to, she said. I didn't come because I was supposed to. I know, he said. That's why I said thank you instead of course. She looked at him, and the look lasted a beat longer than strictly necessary, and neither of them moved, and the gallery was warm and loud around them, and Mia was laughing at something across the room with the laugh that was exactly her mother's and also entirely her own. Lucas, Sophia said. Yeah. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. Of this, of whatever this is. He looked at her for a moment. The afternoon light came through the window, and the room was full of art and noise and people who had come because they wanted to be there. And beside him was a woman who had sat alone in her office on her 30th birthday eating cake with a fork and deciding she could hold on for one more day. Good, he said. I thought you should know, she said. I'm glad you told me. She held his gaze for another moment, and in it was everything that had accumulated between them. The bakery, the coffee, the workshop, the Tuesday evenings, the Christmas spreadsheet, the Thai food at midnight, the conversation about Mia's question, all of it, compressed into something that didn't require naming. Then Mia materialized at Sophia's elbow with 3 cups of punch and the energy of someone who had been managing her own patience for approximately as long as she could manage it. They have cookies too, she said, but you have to go to the table because they're not bringing them around. Lead the way, Sophia said. Mia led the way, and Sophia followed, and Lucas followed both of them, and the afternoon stretched out long and good and unhurried, and he let it. Spring arrived the way it always did in that city. Not all at once, but in arguments with winter, a warm week followed by cold, then warm again, then a late frost that killed half of Vera's tomato seedlings and sent her into a state of dignified mourning that lasted 4 days. By April, the argument was mostly settled. The trees along the street outside the foundation put out their first leaves, tentative and pale green, and the garden plot came back to life in the particular stubborn way of things that have survived being underground. Lucas noticed all of it. He had always been the kind of person who paid attention to seasonal change, not poetically, not in the way people described in writing, but practically, the way someone notices when the light changes because it affects what time you can work outside, when the ground thaws because it changes what you can dig, when the air shifts because your body registers it before your mind does. This spring felt different from the last several. He didn't examine that feeling too closely. He'd learned, in the years since Claire, that some things were better understood by living through them than by analyzing them in advance, and that the urge to analyze was often the urge to control dressed up in reasonable clothes. So he let the spring arrive. He went to work. He picked up Mia. He showed up at the foundation on Tuesdays and Saturdays. He sat across from Sophia in the coffee place 2 blocks away, and sometimes they stayed until the staff were stacking chairs, and neither of them said what it was, and it was clearly something. What changed in April was not dramatic. It was Sophia showing up at his apartment. She hadn't been to his apartment before. They had existed, by unspoken arrangement, in neutral spaces: the foundation, the coffee place, the arts program showcase. His apartment was his space, the one he'd made into a home for him and Mia, and he hadn't invited her because he understood that invitation as a threshold of some kind, and he'd been letting them approach it at whatever pace they approached it. She called him on a Wednesday evening and said, without preamble, "I need to talk to you about something. Can I come over?" The directness of it, the slight strain underneath the directness, made him say yes without asking what it was about. She arrived 40 minutes later. Mia was at a sleepover at a classmate's house, which Sophia had apparently not known, because when Lucas opened the door and she registered the quiet of the apartment, she said, "Is Mia?" "Sleepover," he said. "Come in." She came in and looked around in the particular way people look at someone's private space when they're trying to understand something about the person that they hadn't had access to before. Lucas watched her take it in. The apartment was not decorated so much as accumulated, things chosen because they were useful or because Mia had wanted them. A bookshelf that was double-stacked and slightly chaotic. A drawing Mia had made when she was 5 that he'd had framed and hung in the hallway because she'd drawn the 2 of them holding hands, and the proportions were completely wrong, and he had loved it from the moment she handed it to him. Sophia stopped at the drawing. "That's us," Lucas said, "according to a 5-year-old. "The proportions are wrong," Sophia said. "She had the hands right," he said. "We're holding hands. That's the important part." Sophia looked at the drawing for another moment, and he couldn't see her face from where he was standing, but he saw something in her shoulders. "What did you need to talk about?" he said. She turned to face him. She was in a jacket over a sweater, which meant she'd come from the office and hadn't gone home first, and her hair was loose, and she looked, not distressed exactly, but like someone carrying something she was ready to put down. "Sit down," she said. "I'll stand. I'll sit wherever makes sense," he said, without making it a thing, and went to the kitchen to pour water. She positioned herself near the couch. He brought 2 glasses and sat in the chair across from her and waited. "My company got an acquisition offer," she said. He was quiet. "It's serious, significant number. From a firm that has the infrastructure to do what we were always trying to do but couldn't fully scale to." She said it in the clear, flat tone she used when she was delivering information she hadn't finished feeling about yet. "Warren thinks I should take it." "What do you think?" "I think—" She stopped. "I built that company from nothing. I was 24 years old, and I had a pitch and a laptop, and I talked my way into a meeting with an investor who gave me enough to get started, and I built it. 12 years. She looked at her hands. "And I also think that I've spent the last 2 years keeping it alive through sheer will, and I'm tired, and the offer is real, and maybe—" She stopped again. "Maybe it's okay to let someone else carry it," Lucas said. She looked at him. "I don't know how to do that." "You don't have to know how in advance," he said. "You just decide, and then you figure out the how." She was quiet for a moment, outside the apartment window. The April evening was blue and mild, and somewhere down the street a kid was on a bike, and the sound of it drifted up and then faded. "There's more," she said. He waited. "If I take the acquisition, I stay on for 18 months in a transition role. After that—" She paused. "After that, I'm not running a company. For the first time since I was 24, I don't have the company. And I have the foundation, which I love, but it's not—" She stopped. I've been defining myself by the company for so long that I don't actually know who I am without it. Lucas looked at her. He thought about what she'd told him in December, about the 3 months she hadn't left the apartment, about the particular way loss could strip you of the architecture you'd built your identity on and leave you in a space that had no clear shape. I know what that's like, he said, losing the thing that was holding you together. I know you do, she said. That's why I came here. He absorbed that, the specificity of it, the trust it represented. She had come to him because he was the person who would understand, not because he would reassure her or tell her what to do, but because he had been in a version of that place and had come through it and was still himself on the other side. What do you want to do? He said. Not Warren, not the offer, not the identity question. What do you actually want? She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he didn't push. I want to take it, she said finally. I want to take it and stop holding the whole thing up with my hands and see what's left when I'm not doing that. She looked at him. That terrifies me. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to tell me it'll be fine. I know, he said again. It might not be fine right away. It'll probably be disorienting and uncomfortable for a while. And then it'll be something else. Something else, she repeated, not dismissively, just turning it over. Something you can't see from here, he said, which is the part that's hard. She looked at him for a long moment. In the quiet of the apartment, in the April evening light, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a decision she'd already made and was just now catching up to. Okay, she said. Okay, you're taking it? Okay, I'm taking it, she said. I decided before I came here. I just needed to say it to someone who would understand what it cost. He nodded. You understand what it costs, she said. Not a question. Yeah, he said, I do. She let out a breath that she'd probably been holding for longer than tonight, and her shoulders came down an inch, and she looked around his apartment again. The crowded bookshelf, the drawing in the hallway, the general evidence of a life that had been stripped to its studs and rebuilt, and something in her face settled. Thank you, she said. You did the hard part, he said. I just sat here. Lucas, she said. You have never just sat here. She told Warren the following morning. She called Lucas that evening to tell him it was done, and her voice on the phone was different, lighter in some way, fractionally, the lightness of something decided. How'd Warren take it? Lucas asked. He said good, and then he asked what kind of sandwich I wanted for lunch, and I said I was fine, and he said that wasn't what he asked. I like Warren, Lucas said. He likes you too, she said. He told me I should stop being an idiot about the things that matter, and when I told him I wasn't being an idiot, he did not agree. Was he right? A pause. He's almost always right, she said. It's deeply irritating. May settled in warm and pollen thick, and Mia finished the school year with the energy of someone who had been managing the concept of summer vacation for approximately 3 months and was ready to stop managing and start living it. She had opinions about what the summer should contain. More arts program, a trip somewhere, Lucas teaching her to cook something other than scrambled eggs, and expressed with the careful casualness that he recognized as her most deliberate register, more time with Sophia. We should do something with her, Mia said, like an actual thing, not a foundation thing. What kind of thing? Normal thing, like a picnic or something. A picnic. People have picnics, Mia said, defensive. It's a normal activity. It is, he agreed. So? So I'll ask her. Mia looked at him with the expression of someone who had been maneuvering toward this outcome for longer than she was admitting. Okay, she said, with enormous studied neutrality. He asked Sophia on Tuesday. He said Mia had requested a picnic, which was true, and which also provided cover for the fact that he wanted it too. And Sophia said yes without deliberating, which was new. There had been a time when she would have weighed an invitation like this, turned it over, looked for the implications. She just said yes. They went on a Saturday in late May, a park on the north end of the city that Mia had selected based on a review she'd read that described it as having excellent ducks, which was her primary criterion. Lucas made sandwiches, and Sophia brought a container of the bakery's lemon bars, which she produced from the bag with a slight raise of her eyebrows that was directed at him specifically, and he looked at the pink bakery box and then looked at her, and something passed between them that didn't need words. Ren says hello, Sophia said. You talked to her. I went back, Sophia said, a while ago. I wanted to thank her. She paused. She told me everything. What you said, how you paid, all of it. She felt terrible about keeping it, and she'd been carrying it for months. I told her not to say anything. I know, but I walked in there knowing the truth, and she could see that I knew, and she needed to say it. Sophia looked at the lemon bars in her lap. She cried a little. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. Lucas was quiet for a moment. So you knew for a while before you told me you knew. About 3 weeks, she admitted. That's very calculated. I was deciding how to feel about it, she said. I needed time. And what did you decide? She looked at him. Mia was 20 yards away in full negotiation with a large duck that had approached with clear intent. The May afternoon was warm and the grass was very green and the city was a low hum in the distance. I decided I was grateful, Sophia said, that someone saw me before they knew me, before I'd done anything to earn it. She paused. Just because I was there and it was my birthday and I was trying not to fall apart. You were doing okay, he said. You would have been okay. Maybe, she said. But okay isn't the same as not being alone in it. He looked at her. The afternoon light was direct and warm, and she looked like herself. Not the armor, not the management, just her, in a green sweater on a park blanket with a container of lemon bars, watching his daughter conduct a diplomatic incident with a duck. No, he said, it isn't. Mia came back victorious. The duck had retreated, and sat down between them and immediately began interrogating the sandwich situation with the focus of a food critic who had opinions. They ate in the afternoon light, and Mia talked about the summer, and about a book she was reading, and about whether ducks had friendships, which became a surprisingly extended conversation that neither Lucas nor Sophia felt equipped to definitively resolve. And at some point, Sophia and Mia were in the middle of a side argument about whether the large duck had been aggressive or merely assertive. And Lucas sat slightly back and watched the two of them and felt something so big and quiet that he had no immediate name for it. He had learned, after Claire, that grief and joy were not opposites, that you could miss someone with your whole chest and also be, in the same moment, genuinely happy. That love didn't have a fixed quantity that got divided up, that there was something in him that had loved Claire completely, that would always be true, and that there was room beside it for this, for the woman arguing with his daughter about duck temperament, for the afternoon, for all of it. He had known that in theory for a while. Sitting in the park in May, he felt it in the actual way that required no theorizing. The acquisition closed in August. Sophia signed the paperwork on a Thursday morning, texted Lucas afterward. It's done. He texted back, how do you feel? And after a pause, she sent, like I just let go of something heavy, and I'm waiting to see if I fall. And he sent, you're not going to fall. And she sent back, I know. But ask me again in a month. He did, a month later, and she said, lighter, strangely lighter. And he said, not strange. And she sent a voice message instead of a text, which she rarely did. And in it she said, I've been thinking about something. I want to tell you in person, but the short version is, I think I've been afraid of being okay, not afraid of things being hard, afraid of things being actually, genuinely okay. Because when things are hard, you know what you're managing. When things are okay, you have to just live in it, and I'm not sure I knew how to do that. A pause. I'm learning. I think I'm actually learning. The message ended. He listened to it twice in his truck in the parking lot of a job site. Then he drove to the foundation. October came back around in the particular way anniversaries do. Not suddenly, but accumulating. The air changing first, then the light, then the small sensory details that belong to a specific time of year and no other. The smell of the air on a certain kind of morning. The way the leaves looked on the trees outside the foundation 2 days before they peaked. Lucas noticed all of it because it was the year's turning and because this particular turning carried weight. 1 year since he had sat in a bakery on Clement Street and watched a woman hold herself together by will alone and cancel her own birthday cake. 1 year since he'd put money on a counter and walked out and driven away and thought he would never see her again. He thought about that a lot in the days leading up to it. Not with sentimentality exactly. He was not naturally sentimental, had always been skeptical of the way people turned stories about their own lives into lessons with clean edges. Because the clean edges were the part that got invented in the retelling. Real things were messier. Real things had wrong turns and bad weeks and moments that didn't fit the arc. But he also thought something happened in that bakery. Something small, that was also not small. He had noticed a stranger's pain and done something about it in the only way that felt right, with no expectation of return, and the return had been everything that had happened since. He didn't think he'd caused all of it. I thought he'd opened a door that might have stayed closed, and what had walked through it was two people's willingness to keep showing up, to sit across from each other in a foundation kitchen with bad coffee and be honest about difficult things, to let the other person see the parts that were not okay, to keep coming back. That was the part you couldn't do for someone. You could open the door. Everything after that was a choice. He thought about what he wanted to do for her birthday this year. He thought about it for 2 weeks, quietly, the way he thought about things that mattered, without rushing. What he decided was small. That was intentional. Quote, he told Mia the plan on a Sunday morning over cereal, and Mia listened with full attention and then said, "That's really good, Dad," with a sincerity that had no performance in it, and Lucas knew he'd gotten it right. On the morning of Sophia's birthday, he drove to the bakery on Clement Street. Wren recognized him immediately, and she didn't say anything significant, just nodded and said the order was ready, and he paid and took the pink box and set it on the passenger seat of his truck and drove to the foundation. Sophia arrived at her usual time, which was before everyone else. Lucas was already in the kitchen when she came in, and he had made coffee with the good beans he'd brought from the coffee place 2 blocks away, which he ground that morning in his apartment with Mia supervising critically, and there were 2 cups on the table and the pink box in the center. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at the box. She looked at him. "Wren," he said, "says she remembers exactly how you take it." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Something moved through her face in layers. Recognition, memory, the particular feeling of a circle completing, and she held herself very still in the way she did when she was managing the size of what she was feeling. "Lucas," she said. "Happy birthday," he said. 31. Still counts. She came into the kitchen. She looked at the box again, then at him. "Open it," he said. She lifted the lid. Same pink buttercream, same hand-piped peonies. In the center, in the same slightly uneven script, Sophia, 31. Not alone. She made a sound that was not quite a word. She pressed her hand over her mouth in the way he recognized, the way she cried when she was trying to be quiet about it, which he had only seen once before, from a distance, in a parking lot, before he knew her at all. He didn't say anything. He let it be what it was. After a moment, she lowered her hand and looked up at him, and her eyes were wet and direct, and she was not pretending they weren't. "Not alone," she said. "Not alone," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and in that moment was everything: the bakery, and the parking lot, and the ceremony, and the Tuesday evenings, and the December workshop, and the Thai food at midnight, and the park in May, and the duck, and the acquisition papers, and all the coffee, and all the conversations, and the 8-year-old with the great handshake, who had her mother's laugh and her father's stubbornness, all of it present and accounted for. She reached across the table and took his hand. He held it. They stayed that way for a while, in the foundation kitchen in October, with good coffee and a birthday cake between them and the morning just starting outside. And neither of them said anything because there was nothing left that needed saying, and they both knew it. What Lucas understood that year about the thing that had started in a bakery on Clement Street was this: kindness is not a transaction. You do not put it in and wait for the return. If you're doing it for the return, it is not kindness. It is an investment with a softer name, and people can feel the difference even when they can't say why. Real kindness is the kind you do when no one is watching and you don't expect to see the person again. It's the kind that doesn't ask the other person to feel grateful, because gratitude is a weight, and weights on people who are already carrying things are not gifts. Real kindness just exists in the world, released, and moves in directions you can't predict. He had not set out to find something. He had set out to do a small, invisible thing for a stranger who looked like she needed it, and then he had driven away, and the rest of it had happened in the space that small thing created. He thought about that sometimes. The specificity of chance, how close you could come to something that would change your life without knowing that's what it was. He'd almost not said anything to Wren. He'd almost left the bakery before Sophia arrived. He had been sitting at the corner table because the table near the window had been taken. You couldn't engineer it. You couldn't reverse engineer it. All you could do was pay attention and act when something in you knew to act, and not spend too much time asking why. He thought about Mia, who had not replaced her mother's voice in her memory, but had found, in the months since, other things. The way Sophia laughed at something Mia said and looked startled by her own laughter, which Mia found extremely entertaining and had started deliberately engineering. The way Sophia listened to Mia's positions on things, which were often extreme and occasionally insane, with genuine engagement, not the patient tolerating a child engagement, but the real kind. The way Sophia had come to Mia's second arts program showcase in September and stood in front of the new painting, larger this time, in blues and golds, still ambiguous, still both things at once, and said, "I think I understand what you're doing with the texture now." And Mia had looked at her with an expression of pure, transparent joy at being understood. Mia had told Lucas that night, getting ready for bed, "I think I love her." He'd been quiet for a moment. "I think I do too," he'd said. And it was simple, and it was enormous, and both those things were true at the same time, which was how the real things tended to be. He asked her on her birthday, in the evening, after the staff had gone home and Mia was there. He had picked her up after school and brought her to the foundation, and she had pretended not to know why, which was the most elaborate performance of her life, and was also completely transparent, and Sophia had watched Mia pretending not to know, and met Lucas's eyes across the room with a look of barely contained amusement. There was no stage set. There was no elaborate gesture. Lucas was not a man who did things for effect, and Sophia was not a woman who wanted them done that way. He just crouched beside her wheelchair, which put them at the same eye level, and he took both her hands, and he said, "I would like us to do this for a long time. All of it. The foundation and the Tuesdays and the bad coffee and the good coffee and the arguments about ducks. I would like you to be in our life. Permanently." Sophia looked at him. Mia was across the room with her hands pressed together under her chin in a state of extraordinary controlled tension. "Is that—" Sophia's voice was steady and also not steady. "Is that you asking me?" "Yes," he said. "That's me asking you." She looked at his face, and he let her look, because he understood she was not someone who made the decision and then filled in the certainty. She needed to look first, to check the thing against reality, to make sure what she was seeing was actually what was there. He stayed still. He let her see him. "Yes," she said. "Lucas, yes." From across the room came a sound that was either a sob or a celebration or some indistinguishable mixture of both. And then Mia was there, crashing into them with the total physical commitment of a 9-year-old who has been waiting for something for so long that the arrival of it removes all restraint. And she wrapped her arms around Sophia's neck and then Lucas's. And Sophia's arms came up and around her, and Lucas put his hands on both of them. And the three of them stayed like that in the foundation kitchen on the evening of Sophia's 31st birthday, a little awkward, slightly off balance, nothing like a photograph. Completely real. Completely theirs. Here's what nobody talks about when they talk about kindness and second chances and the way lives sometimes turn toward each other. It is not clean. It does not arrive in a bow. The days after the yes were ordinary days. A disagreement about logistics, a morning where Sophia's transition anxiety spiked, and she was short with Lucas in a way that required an honest conversation afterward. A week where Mia's school schedule and Lucas's job and Sophia's foundation commitments made it nearly impossible for them to be in the same place. A Tuesday they didn't make it to the coffee place because life intervened in the way life does, without apology. None of it was smooth. All of it was worth it. That is the thing about choosing someone, which is different from falling for them. The choosing happens in the ordinary days, the difficult ones, the ones without any inherent romance or poetry. You choose in the morning when everyone is tired and nobody is their best self. You choose in the disagreements and in the recoveries from them. You choose in the accumulation of small moments that don't individually seem like much and are, collectively, the entire thing. Lucas had chosen Claire that way, day after day, for the years they had, and the grief of losing her had been the size of the love, which was large. He chose Sophia that way, not in the bakery, which had been something else, a simpler reflex of human decency, but in all the Tuesdays after, in the decision to keep showing up, in the moments he could have retreated and didn't. She chose him back in the same way, incrementally, with full knowledge of the cost, in spite of and because of everything she was and everything she'd been through. And Mia, who had learned at 8 years old that love did not have a fixed quantity and that your heart had more than one room, chose both of them every day with the uncomplicated certainty of someone who had not yet been taught to be afraid of how much she felt. She was the bravest of the three of them. She had always been the bravest. What? The following October, the bakery on Clement Street hosted a small gathering. Wren had closed the front room for the evening and set up extra chairs and a long table along the wall, and there was food, and there was noise, and there were children from the Foundation's programs running loose with the energy of children who understand they are at a celebration without fully grasping what is being celebrated. In the center of the table was a pink cake. 3 tiers, hand-piped peonies. The inscription in that same uneven human script, Sophia. 32. Home. She had written that one herself, too. She sat beside Lucas and across from Mia, who was running a side commentary on everything with the speed and volume of someone who felt completely at home in this room, which she did, because she had inherited her father's quality of belonging wherever she decided to belong, and her mother's quality of making other people feel like they belonged too. And both of those things were entirely her own now, worn into her, permanent. Wren came and sat with them for a while. Vera came, in a hat she wore to special occasions, and a sweater that had a small embroidered tomato on the sleeve, which she said was ironic, and which everyone understood was not ironic at all. Warren came, and he brought his wife, a woman named Diane, who was direct and warm, and who took one look at the situation and said to Sophia, "Finally," which made Sophia laugh in the unguarded way. Joel came. Phoebe came, in her purple hair, and brought 3 of the arts program students who had aged into teenagers without losing the quality of paying attention to the world that good art instruction tends to preserve. Lucas's sister came from Portland with her family, and she and Lucas stood near the window for a moment while the room was loud around them. And she looked at Sophia and at Mia and at the whole picture of it, and she said, "How did this happen?" Not dramatically, just the genuine question of someone accounting for the distance between where things were and where they are. "Slowly," Lucas said, and then all at once. His sister looked at him. She had known him for his entire life, had seen him at his best and his worst, and at the worst, the year after Claire, when he had barely been present inside his own body. She looked at him now, in this bakery in October, and her eyes went shiny in the way she would definitely deny if he mentioned it. "She's good," she said. Not a question. "She's very good," he said. "And Mia?" He looked across the room at his daughter, who was explaining something to 2 of the arts program teenagers with her usual total confidence and her hands moving to illustrate her point. And one of the teenagers was nodding along and the other was laughing. And Mia was not bothered by the laughing because she understood the difference between being laughed at and being laughed with, and she was accustomed to being the latter. "Mia is the best person I know," he said. "I've mentioned this." "You have," his sister said. She wiped her eye with her wrist. "You have a family, Lucas." He looked at her. "I had one before," he said. "I have a bigger one now." She nodded. She didn't try to say anything to that, which was correct, because nothing needed to be added. Later, after the cake was cut, and the room had gotten louder and Mia had organized the Foundation kids into something that was either a game or a small court proceeding, Sophia found a moment where the space beside Lucas was quiet, and she moved into it. They sat together and watched the room. "Wren's crying," Sophia said. "She's been crying since we walked in," Lucas said. "She's sentimental." "She is," he said. "She kept a secret for almost a year. She earned it." Sophia was quiet for a moment. She had a glass in her hand, and she turned it slowly, a habit, and the room was warm and full around them, and her birthday cake was half gone in the best way. "Lucas," she said. "Yeah. I've been thinking about something. Tell me." She looked at the room, at the children running, at Vera and her tomato sweater, at Joel and Warren in conversation near the door, at Mia presiding over her small kingdom in the corner with complete authority. "I want to start a program," she said, "through the Foundation, for people who are going through hard years. Not big things, not money, not services, just someone notices them, anonymously. Something small, on the days that are hardest. A meal, a birthday cake." She paused. "Something that says, you're seen, you're not invisible. You don't have to earn being taken care of." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "What made you think of it?" he said. and his voice had something in it that was dry and direct and also warm, and she heard all of it. "Something someone did for me once," she said, "on my 30th birthday, in a bakery, anonymously, without asking for anything back." He looked at her. "One small thing," she said, "that someone thought was nothing. That was everything." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He reached over and took her hand the way he had in the kitchen that morning a year ago, and she held it the way she had then, and the room went on around them bright and full, and outside the bakery windows the October city moved in all its noise and ordinary complexity, all those lives crossing and missing each other, and occasionally, improbably, finding each other. That was the thing about kindness, done quietly, without an audience. You never knew how far it would travel. You never knew what it would build, or who it would reach, or how many years later someone would be sitting in a warm room full of people they loved, tracing everything back to one small decision made without expectation in a bakery on Clement Street. You just did it, and you let it go, and you trusted that it would land somewhere it was